podcast about comics. A podcast about comics.
For a long time, we had a lot of A and B characters, that they were pushing out there on the front. But now we're getting these C and D characters.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll accept it. I know he's a C and D character, but for me, he's always been an A character.
He's always been an A character. But a lot of these characters are now getting their spotlight.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And it's cool to see that. And I think that as we keep getting further and further into these, I guess we have to call them C and D characters. We'll just call them not as popular characters.
Yes. Unpopular.
I think fans who've only been MCU fans will start to realize how expansive this Marvel Universe really is.
Yes.
And how complex it is. Yes. And I think, to kind of tie this back to where we started, I think Moon Knight is going to be that show that's going to kind of pop that open, right?
Yeah.
Because we've kind of danced around it for a little bit. WandaVision danced around it. Loki danced around it. I don't really think Hawkeye pushed the envelope to like how crazy the MCU could be. I don't think Falcon and Winter Soldier did.
That was a very what do you call it?
Just kind of like
underground tone.
Yeah, it's cut and dry. Like it's your standard. This definitely is MCU that we've seen before, right? It's not anything too crazy. I think the closest we've seen that really kind of broke things open, but it wasn't in a show, was the most recent Spider-Man film. Because that really showed the potential of what could be in the Marvel Universe of when you break open the multiverse and you break open these holes and pockets into other realms. And I think Moon Knight, now that we know for sure Khonshu's in here, we're tying in gods. And we kind of got a little taste of that in the Eternals.
Yeah.
But this is now at the forefront, and we know there's more gods coming.
Yeah.
And
well, we know that Love and Thunder is coming, right? And Christian Bale is set as God, a God Butcher.
Yep.
So if he's a God Butcher, he's going to be killing gods.
Yep.
Right? And we're going to be getting more and more gods popping up. Whether it's Egyptian gods or Norse gods, whatever these gods are. I think Zeus is slated to make an appearance. I think Russell Crowe is playing him.
Okay.
Or something like that.
News to me. So.
Yeah, I think I read something like that a while back. I think he's supposed to pop up in Love and Thunder.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. So we're getting to see more of this. I forgot what the actress name. We just talked about her earlier. Supposed to be got casted as Bass.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we get to see the silhouette of Bass in the opening scene of Black Panther, where she goes before Bashenga, right? We're actually gonna get her now.
Well, you do see Bast as a statue when Mark is wandering around
in the museum.
Yeah. You also see Ra. You see Anubis, which is also another nod to the Book of the Dead, and
I saw that. Yeah.
There, Book of the Dead in the Marvel Universe has ties back to the Darkhold, so again tying everything back to Multiverse
of Madness.
So I really think at the end of this show, and this is just my personal opinion, hot take right here, it's going to lead us right into something pivotal and leave us wanting more, and it's going to be answered in Multiverse of Madness. Yeah. It has to, right? Because why wouldn't it? Everything we're seeing is
let me say this, because if we're paying attention, we'll see these things, right? So in Eternals, Dane Whitman is working in one of the museums in London, right? When he goes and he pulls out the sword with the
ebony blade,
in it, right? We hear Mahershala Ali,
the
Blade, says to him, "Are you sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?" So Blade is in London with Dane Whitman, right? Well, we see that Grant is working at a museum in London.
Oh, really?
Right?
What are you alluding to?
If I could see it ending to where one of the Sanctorums.
So now you're giving a spoiler alert for. This is not end of Moon Knight. You're saying.
No, well, if we go back into Black Panther, right?
Yeah.
Wakabi said we have sleeper agents in London, Tokyo, and New York.
So this is end of Multiverse of Madness. You're thinking this is going to be a setup there.
I think it's going to be a setup.
And I'm excited because I know where you're going with this.
You see what I'm saying?
You're saying we might get Midnight Suns.
We might get Midnight Suns.
Okay.
And you cannot have a Midnight Suns without Moon Knight. You cannot have a Midnight Suns without characters like Blade or Black Knight.
Mm-hmm.
So with all of this going on, and we know they're put together by Stephen Strange, aka Doctor Strange, I believe we can see something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Moon Knight now has a pivotal character, a pivotal role in this onslaught of characters, epic characters, and I could see a Midnight Suns movie.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I think they could do a lot more with a Midnight Suns show.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of character building, right?
Yeah.
And you have time in there to build Blade. You have time in there. We know Blade is going to be in a movie, but we can build Blade. We can build Dane Whitman more than what we got in Eternals.
Yeah.
We can build Mark even more than what we got in Moon Knight.
Do you think with how top-notch that casting for Midnight Suns would be, that it would be a show, though? Because that would be I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love it to be a show, because I feel like it would have to be for how much happens in Midnight Suns, but that's also, like, top billing of casting.
Yes. Also, the villain that they would have to battle or fight against is going to be somebody big.
Right.
If you're going to pull them together, you're going to have to deal with somebody like Lilith.
So that's where I think it might be a movie,
Dracula,
right?
Right? Because you would think, because of the magnitude of that villain, it would be a movie.
Yeah.
Right? Because that villain is going to be on an equivalent level of a Thanos, but of a supernatural
level, yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. It might not be a show, but definitely movie level. Yeah.
So I could see that down the road. You heard it here first.
So speaking of villains, Moon Knight, we do see in the trailer a Harrow, a Dr. Harrow.
Yeah. Played by Ethan Hawke.
There's a different Harrow in Marvel Comics too. That's just Harrow, but this is Dr. Harrow.
Mm-hmm.
Very obscure character within the Moon Knight mythos and Rogues Gallery.
Yeah.
Literally one issue. One issue happens to be Fist of Khonshu, Moon Knight #2. Have it right here.
Yeah.
His role in here is very minimal. I actually had to go back and reread the issue to make sure. I was like, yep, he's in one issue. That's it.
One issue.
So Dr. Harrow's background, at least in the comics, because we know in the show it seems like they're going to take, I guess, maybe just his name and maybe some of the characteristics of Harrow from the comics, just a few, and mash it up with what we're going to guess is Sun King, I'm assuming, because that's what the speculation is. Has that been confirmed?
I don't think it's a confirmation. I think it's a rumor.
Because that's all I've been seeing too is rumors.
Yeah.
I have not seen confirmation. I know a lot of times you're my man for the confirmation, and I have not gotten the official T'Challa confirmation.
I haven't gotten confirmation in that one. So I think it's right now. It's just a rumor. I haven't seen it confirmed.
Dr. Harrow in the comics, his little backstory: Nobel Prize winning scientist, working on pain therapy. So you can already see there the ties to what Mark is dealing with, or at least in the show, we know at that point he's Steven. And maybe Steven in the show is seeking him out, because it seems like at one point he walks into the crowd and Steven seems kind of lost. And the followers of Dr. Harrow all kind of like bow, because he's a cult leader or something.
Yeah.
And Steven looks kind of out of place, and maybe Steven is seeking him out in order to deal with whatever he's dealing with, because it seems like they're in the same place at the same time. But in the comics, Dr. Harrow has a really troubled past that gets surfaced. So as he's about to win the Nobel Prize, finds out through misinformation or something along these lines that he starts diving into Nazi experiments. And the tie there, for a little bit of background story more on Mark Spector, is in Marvel Comics, he does have a Jewish upbringing. Mm-hmm. He is a Jewish character. Curious to see if they're going to show that at all in Marvel or the MCU.
I don't think they would be opposed to that, right? Because again, they are not afraid to scratch the surface or to to talk about insensitive things.
Right.
And I think if they are more, I guess you can say, unbiased when it comes to talking about homosexuality, talking about racism, talking about other cultures.
The serious issues that need to be talked about, bring them to the forefront.
Yeah.
Marvel, I mean, even in comics, they've never been afraid to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I think has always been really forward-thinking and profound. And that even goes back to, I mean, Stan Lee, R.I.P. the man, miss him still to this day.
Yeah, man. So missed.
But every time you ever heard the man talk, he always talked about how he always wanted to make sure that Marvel Comics was a place for everyone to enjoy.
And everyone to be welcome.
And everyone to be welcome. And they always were pushing the envelope on the characters that were being portrayed and what could be identified as a hero. And that the heroes, I mean, Spidey is probably his most prized character because he even said it all the time, that the struggles that Peter Parker went through, anyone could relate with. And I think that's why he made such a splash with so many kids, is like, I can identify with this kid and he's having the same problems as me, but he's also a superhero.
Yeah.
So long story short, going back to Dr. Harrow, I'd be curious to see if they're going to touch upon in the show, does he maybe still deal with Nazi experiments? Is it going to be Hydra? I don't know how they're going to tie that in. Is that even going to be talked about at all? Is it just going to be he's a pain therapist that decided to open a clinic that turned into a cult? Because if it's going to be merged with the Sun King, that's a completely different character in Marvel Comics.
But we do see Ra.
And you do see Ra in the museum. And for a little background story of the Sun King in the comics, he gets his powers from Ra. And as I alluded to earlier, Ra is I think I said it right?
Yeah. Did you say it?
I'm not sure. There's ties between Ra and Khonshu.
They're they're gods.
They're Egyptian gods, so
they're relatives.
They're relatives.
Yeah.
But you literally have to hop from the 1980s and go all the way to a run that just popped a few years ago. Funny enough, the run is Crazy Runs in the Family, and this is Moon Knight 188, and this is where you get the introduction to the Sun King.
Okay.
So you have to hop 30 plus years. To get to the Sun King.
Yeah.
So the fact you have, wrong issue, but you have one issue, here we go, with Harrow, and then you hop over to another character, Sun King, and somehow there's going to be a connection. I could see it if you know the background story of the Sun King.
If you know the background story. But again, you have some of the general audience, right, who are, a lot of them are new fans. So for them, it's going to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they'll be able to wrap their head around it.
Or it's going to be easy because they don't know anything about either the characters.
True.
And
so they either get it or don't get it.
The way Marvel kind of wraps up sometimes these villains into one character or takes nods from the comics and puts them into one nicely, folded up character. Sometimes for the viewer who doesn't know comics, it's easier for them to digest.
Yes.
Where us who knows comics are like,
we're like, what is that? What are you doing?
We're like sitting here trying to connect the dots. So.
I had a moment like that in Black Panther, and then I understood, right? Because Eric Killmonger is not T'Challa's cousin in the comics,
right?
But in order to make Eric Killmonger be the villain, because he is Black Panther's nemesis, always have been, only person that ever had beaten Black Panther, hand to hand, right? To make him relevant, you had to make him his relative,
right?
So in order to make him his relative, what you did was you took his actual uncle in the comics and made his uncle Killmonger's father in the movies, right? To make his claim to the throne more relevant.
Yep.
And he's not really the villain, right? Because they two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
It's just Killmonger had a more aggressive way of going about things, which came off wrong, choking off little old ladies. Not cool. But to drive the story in one direction or to tell the story, you made him his relative.
Right. And that's happened plenty of times before. I mean, even going back to Luke Cage, the way they made Cottonmouth his half-brother.
That wasn't Cottonmouth. That was Diamondback.
That's right.
Yeah.
I apologize. Yeah, Diamondback, because in the comics they just were like best friends growing up, and in the show they gave him the tie to the family, to
the
dad, to give him again that depth where you're like, oh, Luke definitely has to care about this a little bit more, which it makes sense, right? Like, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with Harrow, because at this point it's a character, even if you know the comics, you don't know anything about. I don't know anything about, because they're doing a completely new interpretation, new take. But I still don't think he's the main villain. That's just my personal take here.
Yeah. But he's definitely the antagonist.
He's the antagonist. Yeah. I think, like any other MCU show we've seen before, we're going to see this as the antagonist. You're going to think it's the antagonist, but there's obviously going to be a bigger arc. Bigger bad that is going to probably be revealed in the last few episodes. But I also think that they might actually use Khonshu as probably the bigger bad. And the reason I say that is in the later issues of some of the more recent Moon Knight comics, and even going back to the originals, Khonshu has always had a very difficult relationship with Mark, and has almost been to the point where Mark knows he has to answer to him, but at the same time, Mark always wants to break away from him.
Yeah. It's a tug-of-war thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely have a tug-of-war kind of relationship. And it's funny. Like, a part of the trailer had me, like, giggling, right? Of how bad he was toying with him. Because Mark is running. He's coming behind Mark. And Mark gets in the elevator, and you see him coming, dragging his crescent cane up towards the elevator. And then the elevator is about to close, and his hand goes in there. But when the elevator is now reopened, it's an old lady. Right? And I'm like, are you toying with him because it's not cool? Right? And you kind of feel that, right? And for all the readers of the Moon Knight comics, they get that.
Yeah.
And I think that would be like the sweetest joy, is watching how Khonshu is toying with him the whole time while he's dealing with everything else.
Yeah. And I think what's going to be interesting that we can see from the trailer is we're not seeing Mark from the get-go. We're seeing Steven. And we're also seeing Steven not knowing he's Mark.
Yeah, I don't think we get to see Mark at all in the trailer.
And we're also going to see him come into his own to become the mantle of Khonshu and become Moon Knight, right? So we're going to have to follow along with Steven as he starts piecing everything together, and at some point it's going to all click, and he's going to become Moon Knight at some point, right? Because it's not like right out of the gate, hey, I'm Moon Knight.
Yeah. Do you think we get that backstory? That how he is that way? Well, what had happened? Because he's left for dead in the desert, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to go that far. It's the spoilers.
In the comics,
yes. So
he's left for dead.
Yes. So in the comics, he is left for dead, and at that point, that is where Khonshu comes in and pretty much resurrects him and makes him the Fist of Khonshu. Do we get that in the show? We've seen plenty of nods to Egypt. Yeah. We've seen that one scene where he's looking up and it looks like he's in what appears to be an Egyptian tomb of some nature. Mm-hmm. Is that right when he is first getting his abilities for the first time from Khonshu?
Or he goes back to seek.
Is that where he's going back to find out what actually happened in his past life? I mean, there's been so many nods in even that trailer of going back to Egypt. When he pulls the phone out, there's a nice little shape of a pyramid. He flips open the phone.
There's the crocodile.
There's a crocodile, which we know what that's a nod to.
We also see a crocodile behind him when he's standing and he's looking up over his shoulder.
Yes. So I think we're going to have to get the original backstory. Is it going to be exactly the same from the comics? I don't know.
I think they might alter it. Now, if we get the exact rendition, I would jump for joy.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to alter it a little bit. I mean, this is 2022. right? So I think we're gonna get something that's a little bit more modernized and relatable for the general masses, but I think they're gonna keep it true to some nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's going to be really fun, though, is I don't know if you remember when the show was first announced, Oscar Isaac actually put out a video of him training for the show.
Yeah.
Do you remember that video?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what he was doing and like the actual techniques and the fightings he was going through? We have not seen that in the trailer whatsoever, except for like a couple of like, okay, it's Moon Knight punching, that's Moon Knight jumping.
I don't think they are going to give us that at anywhere in any trailer teaser until the show.
No, but what's going to be great is when he finally clicks into a very specific identity. I'm trying not to spoil it. You kind of did a little bit here and there, which is fine. When that all clicks, that episode, whenever it happens, and he becomes that one identity, that training that we saw Oscar Isaac,
we're going to get to see him.
Oh my God. That episode. Like, everything's going to come together, and especially when we found out that this show, thanks to Kevin Feige saying, hey, we're going to make sure this is that level, and it's going to be what Moon Knight fans expect, because it's Moon Knight. It has to be at that level.
It has to be.
Man, I don't know what's going to happen.
I honestly think going forward, this probably might be the best show once released today.
I mean, I've already said it.
The complexities of what I'm seeing in the trailer and the teasers, the design of his costume, how it comes on, what it represents, signifies, everything that I'm seeing from the trailer. I love, and there's a part in the trailer when he's like, embrace the chaos. And you see Oscar Isaac goes like this. And you see his comes on.
The wrappings,
right? And the way how the mummification happens, I have never seen anything like that on screen.
No.
That tasteful. That was beautifully done.
Oh, so
and
good.
Whoever the production, designer, all the stuff that went into it. First of all, again, I've been saying this, ever since they released it Phase 4, everything they have been giving me spot on with a purpose. And it's been amazing watching the costume division give us everything.
And my favorite is we already saw confirmation of Mr. Knight.
Yes.
Which is great because, again, that's going to a more recent run. And
that's the more dapper.
That's the more dapper. I mean, we got the look of Mr. Knight. And Mr. Knight is just, I don't know. Like, again, there's so many identities to this character. And if you see even in this shot here where Smallwood... this is one of my favorite actual shots. You can't see it in frame, but I actually have a larger print of this framed up behind me. This speaks so much volumes. It's literally Mark ripping his face off, and you see
the Moon
Knight or Mr. Knight below. I mean, if you want to wrap up in a nutshell Moon Knight, like, this frame itself is probably one of the most powerful frames. And we have confirmation of that. I think it was revealed in the Empire magazine.
Right,
and when I saw that, like, it just put everything into reality. And I mean, me being a cosplayer, I've done Mr. Knight from the get-go.
In fact, you got your Mr. Knight mask.
Yeah, right? I have the Mr. Knight mask right here. So, like, fell in love with the character. I mean, originally, obviously, here's the original Moon Knight right there, but I just thought Mr. Knight was just such a suave, clean look of Moon Knight. Had to put it together, and just to see that come to life and the way it was done, I was just like...
Well, it was beautifully done. It was beautifully done.
So...
yeah, it was beautifully done.
Yeah, I mean...
Listen, I am extremely happy for you, by the way. Because I know you've been waiting on this show
forever.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be great. They have not disappointed. We finally got to see him with his dagger, right?
Yeah.
In
a little crescent dagger.
Crescent dagger in the spot.
Yeah.
I think it was a Super Bowl spot. We also see him floating down
with that crescent cape.
Oh my god!
Again, such awesome nods to the comics, because every time you see the cape drawn in the comics, when he's flying down, floating down, it's always in that crescent shape.
Yeah.
And the fact they pulled that off, I remember I sent you that screenshot. I was just like, oh my god, they did it.
They did it.
They did it. And the fact it was in motion and live action and it looked so good.
Good.
I was just like, okay, it wasn't cheesy at all. And that's where I, like, after that, I'm like, are we gonna get the moon copter? Are we gonna get all these other things? Like, granted, those are like the cheesy side.
I don't think.
I doubt it.
I
doubt it. But that's just like my nerd side of Moon Knight
fandom
like, coming out.
Hey, you never know, man. In Loki, we got to see the Thanos copter. I'm just saying.
Right. It might be like something subtly in the background, or Mark might say something hilarious. Like it might be something like he's gearing up. He's like, maybe I should get a helicopter or something, and that'd be kind of funny for the comic book fans, right?
Yeah.
But I'm curious because there are certain characters within the Moon Knight spectrum that we haven't seen, right? We haven't seen Frenchie. We haven't seen Marlene, which is his girl. Because when he calls and he's talking to the person on the other end of the phone, that at first everyone was thinking, oh, that's going to be Moon Knight's love interest from the comics. But what's been confirmed, it's not. It's been confirmed it's actually someone else very, very important in the grand scheme of things.
Of the MCU, yeah.
And that... Do you want to talk about that as far as...
I think that might be a spoiler.
You think it might be a spoiler?
I think it might be a spoiler.
So we'll just leave that where it's at.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
if you want to dive into that, we gave you the Easter nugget here. Do a little research. That leads to something... I'll just say it's Multiverse of Madness related.
Yes.
If we think that's who it is that they're trying to set up
Set
that
things
long
up
game
for.
for. But we know, as always, MCU always sets up long games.
Sets up long.
But yeah, there is some certain Moon Knight characters that they haven't, I guess, I mean, granted, we've only had like 2 minutes of a trailer and 30 seconds here, so I can't sit here and be like, rah, 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 they rah, rah.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious because those are main characters
Yeah.
that have not been introduced. And maybe it's not in this season. I hope there's going to be more than one season of Moon Knight. I hope Moon Knight carries through. I hope this does very well and we get a lot of Moon Knight. I hope this is just the introduction.
How good do you think Ethan Hawke is going to be as Harrow?
I think he'll be phenomenal. I think the cast, as always, is going to be...
I do hope, and I mean, they've always been good at this, right? I hope he's at the level to stand equal to Oscar Isaac and not be overshadowed.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, even though that character in the comics has a small role and we've only seen him for one issue, he's still pivotal.
Yeah.
You know?
And it also depends which route they go with Harrow, right? If it goes to the fact that he is truly the Sun King and the depth of the Sun King from the more modern run, and they merge it with Harrow, Ethan Hawke's a great actor. So you give a character that has maybe just as much depth, I mean, probably nowhere near as what Oscar Isaac has to do to be Moon Knight, but has a decent amount of depth to parallel, because it has to be on parallel with what Oscar Isaac's doing,
yes,
right? Because that is going to be his counterpart, it's going to be his adversary. We're not saying he's the big bad, because we usually have known there's always another big bad.
Another big bad.
But he has to be on parallel.
Yeah.
And we've seen already, even from the more recent Super Bowl trailer, that there's confrontation where they're literally talking face to face and they have multiple eye-to-eye moments. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like Harrow was challenging Mark in the more recent one. So that, to your point, Oscar Isaac has played very good, crazy, psycho characters in other films.
Has a question for you. Was that Mark that he was talking to?
No, it's true. One of the variations of the identities.
Yeah.
But to your point, Oscar Isaac does play very crazy characters very well.
Very complex characters.
Very well. Ex Machina, fantastic. Yeah. Like, that is when I watched Ex Machina and I was just like, okay, they're going to cast him as Moon Knight. Done. Perfectly fine. And as soon as that casting came out, I was fine. I was worried at first because I knew there was going to be a show. I didn't know who they were going to do. For the longest time, I honestly, I had multiple people like, who do you want it to be? I'm like, I honestly don't know because I can't think of anyone.
Honestly, he's my favorite person out of the new Star Wars, the new trilogy.
Yeah.
He's my favorite person.
Yeah.
Damn right.
Yeah. And even in that, he wasn't playing the psychotic character. He was a very straightforward.
He was
ace pilot.
Yeah. He's
but that shows the range,
his
right?
range, yeah. Very
his range.
seasoned.
He was a weathered pilot that had to take on the rebellion, or pretty much the rebellion on his back and handle everything in there. Now we're crossing Star Wars into here. Look at what's happening here.
Yeah.
But then the flip side is you have Ex Machina, where he's like this psychotic scientist engineer who is cooped up in his compound, is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And loses his mind, and you watch it unravel throughout the film, and the entire time you're like, this is very unsettling.
Yeah.
And that is what you need
Yeah.
for someone who's going to be playing
Who plays that
Mark
kind of character?
Spector / 4 other people, and one who's being terrorized by an Egyptian god who wants him to be.
I think he's gonna be stellar. That one scene where he's standing there, screaming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or like just the energy between that, where he's pounding his face or kicking the glass, like the amount of emotion you just get from the trailer as you're, again, it just feels like you're going along. And that's what I like about it. It's like you feel like you're going along feeling the chaos and the emotion of what Oscar Isaac is trying to portray, and like trying to experience it with him.
And you get that.
And you get that
feel.
And it's only been, like I said, we've only got probably a total of maybe 3 minutes of
3
footage
minutes
total.
Yeah.
And I'm already getting those feelings.
Yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait.
I can't wait.
We're counting down. What are we? A month and a week out from it. It's March.
It's the
30th?
weekend after my birthday, so it's like a birthday gift to myself. When they said they were going to extend it to that weekend, I was like, oh, they know it's my birthday, so thank you, Marvel.
They did.
At first, everyone's like, oh, they're delaying it. I'm like, no, they're just waiting for my birthday.
It's a birthday.
They just know.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I can't wait, man. It's going to be great.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to break it down once it starts coming out.
Yes.
Like, that's going to be the best part, right?
Yeah, we're going to have a blast doing that.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you want to throw in here in the mix that we should touch upon?
No, I think that's it for the Moon Knight.
Okay.
All I'm saying is Midnight Suns, man. I'm seeing Midnight Suns. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it in my soul. I'm like, it's coming. And again, all three of them are there. It only makes sense.
If that gets announced in a theater, someone's gonna have to like probably call an ambulance, because I'm gonna pass out. I'm first gonna scream at the top of my lungs and freak out the theater, and then someone's gonna have to drag my body out, because I'm gonna be lifeless and unconscious.
They're gonna have to, you know.
Because
I'm not gonna lie, like,
have we been wanting Midnight Suns?
It. We did Rumors and Confirmations back in early 2020 or late 2019.
Yeah.
And we called the Midnight Suns back then.
Yeah. And here we are. So, again, you got right here, Podcast About Comics, you know?
Yeah, man.
We call them out first.
Call it as you see it.
And you just wait a couple years, and then you just go, oh yeah, they did say that.
They did.
So.
They did. Coming too, man.
Well, it's been a pleasure as always, man.
Always. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been a blast. We're going to be getting out of here. This is your boy, Tchallabpp74. Goodbye.